In politics, fights are useful.
I won't prejudge what issues citizens might want to put on the table, but
pack up your bag and go. That's my message to the Premier. You're not welcome here anymore.
Like, how dumb does she think we are? Oh, I have nothing to do with separation. It's just those citizens doing it. And don't pay no attention to this bill that I just passed.
talk about how much they support women until they meet a strong conservative woman. Sit down and shut up. Well, I don't shut up. I make sure that Albertans know exactly how I feel about issues.
Especially when you cannot have been both based on work that you actually done. It's not a new tactic.
You know, the chances of Western separatism are absolutely nil and inexistent. Canadians are Canadians, and I don't think they'll fall for that kind of thing, except as bargaining tools by their premiers.
The same strategy was used in the UK during Brexit. It worked in the short term, and then completely tanked the party that pushed it. Danielle Smith didn't rise to power on policies. She rose by picking fights. First, it was Alberta's pension plan.
The province of Alberta releases a report. It says estimates that the Alberta government deserves more than half the assets of the Canada pension plan.
And of course, biggest battleground of all, energy.
That the energy sector is going to be phased out, if it's not going to be phased out.
Smith locked horns with Ottawa over pipelines and emission caps, tapping into a decade of resentment between Alberta and the federal government.
The Prime Minister was asked whether his constitutional proposals, along with next week's budget that is expected to impose unpopular energy taxes on the West, would fuel separatism.
But her real rise began during COVID-19 pandemic. She was one of the loudest voices criticizing lockdowns, vaccine mandate, and public health restrictions.
Community that faced the most restrictions on their freedoms in the last year were those who made a choice not to be vaccinated. So they have been the most discriminated against group that I've ever witnessed in my lifetime.
Taking very policies introduced by her own predecessor, Jason Kenney, Smith called them government overreach. Every time playbook was the same: frame Ottawa as a villain, paint Alberta as a victim, and rally the base. But this year things are different. The Liberals just won the federal election. And if you think that's bad news for Danielle, you're wrong. Your question might be why? Because a Liberal win in Ottawa makes provincial Conservatives politically invisible. And during the campaign, Smith arguably did more damage to Pierre Poilievre than the Liberals did when an audio recording of her leaked.
Before the tariff war, I would say yes. I mean, Pierre Poilievre is the name of the Conservative Party leader, and he was miles ahead of Justin Trudeau. But because of the of what we see as unjust and unfair tariffs, it's actually caused an increase in the support for the Liberals. And so that's what I fear, is that the longer this dispute goes on, politicians posture, and it seems to be benefiting the Liberals right now.
She accepted an invitation to attend a fundraiser with Ben Shapiro during the campaign.
Smith has defended her trip to Florida on Thursday evening with controversial U.S. podcaster Ben Shapiro.
But this isn't about Alberta. This is how Canadian politics works. Conservative premiers usually prefer Liberals in Ottawa because it gives them a punching bag. Still not convinced? Remember when Trudeau's approval rating crashed all over Canada? Guess who was more nervous than Trudeau himself? And that was Doug Ford. Because Ford knew that if Conservatives comes to power in Ottawa, the spotlight would shift on him. That's why he called a snap election, even though he already had a majority till 2026. It's simple. If Ottawa is blue, the Queen Parks might go red or orange. Alberta separatism. It isn't a grassroots movement. It's a desperation move crafted by Danielle Smith, who right now doing is everything to hold on to power while bombshell allegations close in and around her. And let's break it down. AHS procurement scandal. Smith's government is under investigation for questionable procurement contracts at Alberta Health Services. One of her own cabinet member was either pushed out or either resigned for demanding a public inquiry into this matter. But it didn't end in here. Another bombshell allegation came through. Unregistered lobbying allegation. The same former minister has accused Smith's husband of acting as an unregistered lobbyist on the Banff Rail project.
Accused of turning a blind eye and allowing her husband to act as an unregistered lobbyist for a new rail project.
He claims Smith's husband tried to set up a meeting with him when he was Minister of Infrastructure.
As Minister of Infrastructure, I was invited to attend a meeting with David Moretta about Banff Rail. And given, I declined the request because I had concerns about the appropriateness of such a meeting.
Now, pictures posted by Cabinet Minister Devin Dreeshin last year show Moretta in conversation with Smith and Dreeshin at
Smith's defense?
My husband owns a restaurant. He has never, ever been registered as a lobbyist because he has never, ever lobbied any government, including ours, and I would ask for the innuendo and the slander to stop.
Now, a statement from the Premier's office this afternoon says her husband has a long-standing enthusiasm for rail, and the Premier invited him to a meeting because she values his opinion.
Now she's running a province on enthusiasm credentials. If her husband owns a restaurant, can his valuable enthusiasm influence or delay multi-million-dollar infrastructure projects? And let's be real, all this separatist talk, it's a distraction, a smokescreen, a classical political play when walls are closing in. Just like Jason Kenney, Danielle Smith may be facing a leadership crisis of her own. Yes, Alberta has some real disputes with federal government. Emission cap, equalization payments, pipeline politics. But these are policy issues, not existential threat. They can be solved through negotiations. Using a national unity as a bargaining chip, that's not a governing, that's a political theater. Now about equalization. I live in Ontario, and Ontario did receive some equalization payments. But that doesn't mean Ontario is failing. It's still the largest economy of Canada. But these are mismanagements of Ontario government. We should be sufficient enough to manage our own budget. The core of this issue is how Ontario government manages its budget. Case in point, Ontario spent $9 billion on agency staffing in the hospitals. That's the one sector. We haven't even touched the long-term care or education or other provincial sectors. I worked for a company during COVID where managers were using agency staff oftenly, but I remember getting a letter from the head office where they clearly instructed all managers to cease immediate use of agency staffing. But every province has some financial problems. But it doesn't mean that we should tear the country apart. And now come back to Danielle Smith. Leaders comes and go, parties rise and fall, but a country should remain. But if you start pushing separation because East Canada is too left-wing and Alberta need to define itself right-wing state, you start a chain reaction. What happens next? Do Calgary and Edmonton, which lean more progressive, demand to separate from rest of Alberta? And then what? Do municipalities split off? Neighborhoods? Do we all form independent republic states by postal codes? That's exactly the road Danielle Smith is walking on. And she's hoping that nobody notices that this road ends at a cliff. Because once the country fractures, it doesn't stop at the borders. And I hope Danielle understands this. There are Indigenous communities and investors watching her closely, and they are deeply concerned. She may be chasing for short-term power, but the long-term damage is real. So let's hope that it stops sooner than later. And this is the end of this video. Thank you for watching. I will see you in the next one.